That's better. I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is our first budget hearing. Could everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please.
Mayor Paul.
Here.
Vice Mayor Lewis.
Here.
Councilmember Whitman.
Here.
Councilmember Hatton. Councilmember Starkey.
Here.
Mr. Lamack.
Here.
Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Holste.
Here.
Mr. Weinthal.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
May I have a motion to excuse Councilmember Hatton?
Motion to excuse?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. This evening, the budget hearing is a public hearing. We'll be looking at a few items, and the public will have an opportunity to speak. The first thing that we'll look at is an ordinance on the millage rate. This is the first reading. There'll be a second reading on September 20th. Mr. Weinthal, would you read the ordinance by title, please?
Yes, Mayor. An ordinance of the Town of Davie, Florida, establishing the millage rates to be levied for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2023, and ending September 30, 2024, for fiscal year 2024, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. And again, you'll have a second opportunity to hear this on September 20th. The Town of Davie's tentative operating millage rate to be levied for fiscal year 2024 is 5.6250 mils, which is 9.03% greater than the rolled back rate of 5.1590 mils. The tentative voted debt service millage rate for fiscal year 2024 is 0.2020 mils. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? See? Oh, if you want to speak, you can come up. Just the millage rate, yeah. Come up to the microphone. State your name and address.
Gary Price, 4950 Southwest 70th Ave, Davie.
Yes, sir.
I'm opposed to the millage rate increase. I am a CPA by profession. I've been in construction for the last 20 years. The value of all assessed property in Broward County, standing current at over $200 billion. Davie responsible for about $12 billion of that, which is up over the last 10 years as of the end of 21. About 72%. That represents about $100 million in excess revenue to the city over those 10 years. So it's now up, at the end of 21 was up to roughly $228 million. Wind insurance is up 100%, flood is up 30%, homeowners is up close to 40% in some cases. If the rates keep going, it seems like we're going to be facing the same problems we have with the condo market. People are not going to be able to afford to take care of their properties or insure them. We're going to have chronic disrepair. They're going to go up for sale. And with interest rates hovering at around 7%, I'm wondering who's going to buy. And if we're going to end up with the same thing as they have over on the east side of town, where every third house is an Airbnb or a Vacasa or something that people own that aren't invested in our city. It sounds like a housing bubble coming. I realize that running a city is very costly. But what about the taxpayers who are paying for it? I feel like we need a break from some of these other increases that are outside of the customary. There are many ways to increase margins. I mean, I don't think it always has to fall on the burden of the taxpayer. I guess the bottom line is, as you mentioned, without the budget change, we're up 12%. With the budget change, we're up close to 23%. I just feel like 12% is enough. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? I'll close the public hearing. Is there any discussion from council?
I would like to invite the resident to possibly look at the budget if you're interested in seeing how we came up and arrived to that. It's not a millage increase in as much as it is your property values increase. What you will see, however, is that there's a fire assessment fee increase, and maybe that's what you're looking at. That's not what we're voting on for tonight at this point. There'll be a special hearing for the fire assessment fee itself. It is encompassing all together at some point, but as far as the millage rate itself, we really aren't increasing the millage rate of the 5 points is from last year. Correct, Mr. Lemack? Is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, that's correct, but we have to report it differently by law, but the
Right.
millage rate is remaining the same.
Yes, so your millage rate amount, the calculation is not changing. Your property values did, yes, we know, and you know.
No.
Yeah, trim rate's different than what we're voting on with the millage rate, which is what we just read for the millage rate itself. That's not going to increase. We were respectful of what was going on in the economy and around the market, so forth, and that's why many of the staff has been working very hard since January, or probably since right after we voted on last year's budget, to make sure that we address that. So I'd love to share it with you. You're welcome to see what we see anytime. Contact the mayor, any of us, our offices, and most of it will be posted online anyway.
Thank you, Councilwoman. I took the words right out of my mouth.
I don't mean to do that, Mayor.
That's all right. That's perfectly fine. The budget is available for everyone to review, to see how we are expending our monies. Any other comments? May I have a motion on the millage rate?
Motion approved. Second.
You want a roll call?
Yes, Mayor. Mayor Paul,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Councilmember Starkey.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Second thing on tonight's agenda is the budget. Mr. Weinthal will read the ordinance by title.
Yes, Mayor. An ordinance of the Town of Davie, Florida, adopting the budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2023, and ending September 30, 2024, fiscal year 2024, providing for conflict, providing for severability, and providing for an effective date.
Again, there will be a second public hearing on the ordinance. This will be held on September 20th at 5:15. If there's anyone who wishes to speak on the ordinance, you may come forward at this time if you've completed a speaker's form. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Council, you have any discussion? Are you going to make a presentation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon, Richard Lemack, Town Administrator, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members, staff, members of the public. We're here to present fiscal year 2024 for the budget hearing. To ensure compliance with the truth in millage or TRIM statutes, we must first discuss the operating millage rate. For fiscal year 2024, the town proposes a millage rate of 5.6250 mils. The proposed operating millage rate is 9.03% above the rollback rate of 5.1590 and is a tax increase under state law. This operating millage rate is necessary to fund the operating budget of the town to achieve our budget objectives and to maintain our strong fiscal stability. The voted debt millage rate that covers debt service on our general obligation bonds is proposed to decrease from 0.2217 mils to 0.2020. The general fund budget will increase by $31.5 million, or 20% in fiscal year 2024. This increase, in part, is due to our additional positions, primarily in public safety, pension costs, and our collective bargaining agreements. Operating expenditures will increase 25%, largely due to our continued commitment to improve our information technology infrastructure and services, renovation of the gym at the Florence DeGeorge Boys and Girls Club, which will be discussed later in this presentation, funding for a grant vulnerability assessment study, increased insurance premiums for property, flood, and various liability insurances, continued maintenance of our facilities, equipment, and infrastructure, and inflationary impacts to contractual services. The general fund will be transferring over $14.4 million to the Capital Projects Fund to fund 24 projects in fiscal year 2024's Capital Improvement Plan, or CIP. Also, $1.3 million from the general fund operating funding will be transferred to the Vehicle Maintenance Fund for vehicle purchases that are additions to the town's fleet, primarily for the police department. Lastly, the operating funding, we will be setting aside over $1 million for rising costs due to inflation, supply chain delays, and a tight job market. On the revenue side, the general fund will experience healthy revenue growth in ad valorem operating taxes, half-cent sales tax, state revenue sharing, interest on investments, electric franchise fees, school resource officer funding from the school board, federal grants, and building permit fees. Fire assessment revenue increase is due to the increase in the fire assessment rate, which was a focus during our first budget workshop and will be noted further on the slide. Lastly, we will continue to budget $1 million in revenue to be received from the Community Redevelopment Agency as the second of 4 annual debt payments due on the $4 million loan made in fiscal year 2022. As you know, the town's adopted fund balance policy includes provisions for setting aside funding for unforeseen emergencies such as hurricanes and pandemics. We are pleased to report that we are in compliance with our general fund emergency reserve policy, and we remain fiscally healthy. The proposed fiscal year 2024 annual budget carries out the direction provided by Town Council at the Vision and Goal Setting session and public workshops held this past spring and summer. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask Mr. Ackerman to come up, provide more details about the proposed budgets on various funds, but we wanted to share with you the townwide budget outlook in fiscal year 2024 incorporates the following factors and highlights. The town's CRA tax base continues to grow due to increased property values and new construction. As previously mentioned, the operating millage rate will remain unchanged at 5.6250 mils, while the voted debt service millage rate will be reduced in fiscal year 2024. The voted debt millage rate reduction is due to new construction and higher property values. This will be the 10th consecutive year that the voted debt millage rate decreased. The proposed budget incorporates $7.50 per month, or $90 annually, for an increase in the residential fire assessment, and is a corresponding rate increase for other properties. The increase assists in covering costs associated with maintaining an insurance services office, we call that ISO, rating of 1, the highest possible rating. The additional revenue will help fund a greater portion of our fire operating cost, 24/7 full staffing on our ladder truck, fire apparatus replacements, and renovations for our fire stations. We reviewed the details associated with this increase throughout our first budget workshop, and fire assessment revenues, by law, are solely expended on fire-related expenses. Solid waste assessment will increase monthly by $4.14, or $49.71 annually, due to the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, increases, and the end of a credit associated with fiscal year 2021 solid waste excess payments, which had reduced the fiscal year 22 and 23 solid waste assessments. The Public Safety Master Plan study has been completed. We are now beginning to implement the departmental strategic plans to address our community's growing needs. This is tied to the recommended increases to the fire assessment, which will fund areas of the master plan implementation for the fire department. The police department will be implementing a body camera program as part of their implementation. The annual budget will provide $24.8 million for 55 projects in fiscal year 2024 capital improvement program. The Water and Sewer Fund will appropriate $8.8 million for 25 projects to maintain our infrastructure, while at the same time, we continue to work with Sunrise on our divestiture exploration. The General Fund will provide $14.45 million for 24 projects. And we'll continue to monitor for inflation and, of course, budget accordingly for that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ackerman, who'll take us through some more details. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Council members. Bill Ackerman, your Budget and Finance Director. So we're going to review the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. But before we get that far, we're going to review some of the key dates during the actual budget process. It's important to note that for the public that is here today, that it's not just about today and what we talk about today. This is a process. It's a process that goes on several months. It starts back in actually December or so, and gets us to this point today. So we want to make sure that the public understands that what we go over today is not necessarily define the overall budget process, because it does take time to go through this. So it's taking a look at where we've been and what we've done, and actually not even on this chart yet. Back in December, we are finalizing the current year's budget at the time, and while finalizing the budget, actually it's the budget book for the Government Finance Officers Association for the Distinguished Budget Award. We're finalizing that in December. At the same time, we're also putting together the 5-year forecast, which we'll review with administration in January and February. And in fact, in early February, we start working on the payroll budget. The payroll budget is approximately 37% of our budget, so we get the ball rolling on our payroll budget in early February. But then come February 17th to March 8th this past year, the Budget and Finance Department with Human Resources and Administration, we meet with all the different departments and divisions to review the current year's budget as well as the upcoming fiscal year 2024 budget. Come March 9th, we had our budget kickoff meeting with all departments and divisions, as well as Ms. Henry does the Capital Improvement Program kickoff meeting as well. March 30th, as Mr. Lemack pointed out earlier on, we had our Council of Vision and Goal Setting session at that time. And then come April 6th, we have the budgets that are due from all the departments and divisions, need to be turned in by then, so we can start putting together the information. April and May are two months that we go out to the public and we solicit feedback from the residents, from our stakeholders. In the month of April, we had 2 employee budget sessions, and then in the month of May, we had scheduled 6 townwide community forums. And during those meetings, we went over a variety of topics. Some of those topics included the budget outlook. It included significant capital projects. It included some of our short-term and long-term priorities, economic development, amongst other topics that we went over. And again, we asked for feedback, and we got it during those meetings. Come June 7th, we had our first budget workshop, in which at that point, we reviewed the general fund, mostly comparing the fiscal year 23 to fiscal year 24. And also, Ms. Henry had our capital improvements program workshop as well. July 26th, we had our second budget workshop, and at that point, we also reviewed some of the changes in the general fund, reviewed the water and sewer fund, we also reviewed the community endowment fund, as well as the community redevelopment agency fund. Then comes September 6th, where we are today, we have our first public hearing, in which we're going to be approving the tentative budget. It'll be adopted. And on tonight's council meeting, we also have the capital improvement program, which will hopefully be adopted by town council as well. Tomorrow, we have our management staff retreat. And then next Thursday, on the 14th, we will have our fire assessment and solid waste assessment public hearings. And then followed by 2 weeks from today, on the 20th, we'll have our second public hearing, as the mayor had pointed out earlier on. And again, just a reminder, we're not here to go over the same information we've done in the first couple of budget workshops and at the vision goal setting session. Mr. Lemack gave a summary of the overall budget and the budget outlook earlier on. And we just, as you mentioned, we want to make sure we are in trim compliance, truth and millage compliance. So for the fiscal year 2024 budget, this is a snapshot. As we can see, there's a 12% increase in the overall budget from fiscal year 2023 to fiscal year 2024. As noted earlier on, we had talked about in previous workshops, the general fund, the community redevelopment agency fund. We also discussed the endowment fund as well as the water sewer fund. Those four funds do encompass approximately 82% of the town's budget. So now we're going to review some of the larger funds and some of the activities going on within those funds. So first, we're going to start with the general fund. Again, we have discussed the general fund previously at the previous budget workshops. We went primarily focused on the changes from fiscal year 23 to 24, and Ms. Lemack did give some information earlier on this evening about the fiscal year 24 budget and the general fund as well. So in the general fund, it is a primary operating fund of the town, and it's approximately 57% of the town's budget. The budget, as Ms. Lemack noted earlier on, increased by $31.5 million, or 20%. The revenue growth is attributed to the ad valorem operating taxes, the increase in the fire assessment and the rate that we had there. We also had increases in electric franchise fees, building permits, as well as intergovernmental revenue, primarily half-cent sales taxes and state revenue sharing. On the expenditure side, on the commitment side, we have our collective bargaining commitments, and we have to make sure we take care of that. We also added a net of 20 positions from the original fiscal year 2023 budget, which is mostly for public safety. We also had increases in spending on contractual and professional services, and those include project management, engineering design services, the community shuttle buses, the remodeling the gym at the Florence DeGeorge Boys and Girls Club, and the town's contribution towards a new solid waste disposal and recycling material processing authority. We also are seeing higher costs related to utilities, fuel, fleet charges, and insurance premiums. The town, we continue to invest in the town's capital improvement projects. We're transferring $14.4 million from the general fund for capital projects for next year. And also, we have to take into consideration the impacts of inflation and the supply chain issues. So the general fund is the focal point. It's a primary operating fund of our budget, of the town of Davie. And as you can see from this slide here, you can see that we put most of our funding into public safety, approximately 57%. Some of the other notable departments are Public Works at 7%, the Building Division, Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Arts are each at 4%, and those are the departments that are outside that deal with the public consistently. You'll see that non-departmental is a pretty big chunk as well this year. It's 16% of our budget. And there's a reason for that. As we noted before, we are transferring approximately $14.5 million to the Capital Projects Fund for the CIP for next year. We're also transferring $4.3 million to the Community Redevelopment Agency for our tax increment financing. We've also budgeted to transfer $2.1 million to the Debt Service Fund for the new debt that we've issued a couple of years ago. That was for the Town Hall and the Davie Wetlands Park. And lastly, we're also transferring $1.2 million to the Vehicle Maintenance Fund, and that's for the additions to fleet for the police department. So what are some of the notable changes in the general fund since the last budget workshop? Since the last budget workshop, we have increased the budget in the general fund by approximately $1.6 million. As we mentioned at the second budget workshop, throughout the budget development process, when we're looking at making changes to the payroll, we're always looking to make changes on the spot. If someone changes because of a qualifying event or health benefits, somebody retires, resigns, gets promoted, we make those changes directly into the budget so we have the best possible budget for the upcoming fiscal year. Also, in reviewing the personnel side, we also had to increase some of the amounts for the front loading for the police department as well. We are doing renovations to the Florence DeGeorge Boys and Girls Club. Now, initially, we were going to include this project within our capital improvement program. However, after further discussion, this is not a town asset. It is not a town asset. Therefore, it's not going to be in the CIP, and we've included part of it here in the general fund, and part of it also in the Community Development Block Grant Fund. We are getting funding from two places for this project. We're getting it as a contribution as well as a grant. The contribution portion of $1 million is coming into the general fund, and it'll be expended out of the general fund. Also, since the last budget workshop, we are returning some funding from the Capital Projects Fund related to some CIP projects that were closed down, and we also had to adjust some of the amounts for the IT internal charges for information technology. Next, we're going to review the special revenue funds. A special revenue fund accounts for funds received with specific restrictions on how the funds must be spent. So an example of a special revenue fund is the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency Fund. Now, at the last budget workshop, we did discuss the CRA, so we're just going to give a quick summary at this budget workshop, at this budget hearing. For the CRA, we do have to carry forward the entire estimated fund balance, which is what we have done. We are appropriating projects and programs that are consistent with the redevelopment plan. The focus will be on the development incentives and property improvement grants that we have within the budget. And also, we are carrying over a project for undergrounding of the FP&L power lines, which will be an operating expense for us. And as we've done in previous years, the CRA will continue to enhance the services provided by our police department for the redevelopment area. So moving on, for additional special revenue funds, we have the Community Development Block Grant and SHIP, which is the State Housing Initiatives Partnership. We also have ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act. We have impact fees, forfeiture, affordable housing, and community endowment. And just as a reminder, at the last budget workshop that we had, we did discuss and review the Community Endowment Fund. So within special revenue funds, within the CDBG or SHIP funds, we have a couple of items in there. First, we have 2 Boys and Girls Club remodeling. We're finishing up the Rita and the Rick and Rita case remodeling as well. And we're also working on, as we noted before, the Florence DeGeorge Boys and Girls Club. Now, we mentioned before that part of the funding is coming from contributions in the general fund. The other funding is coming from the CDBG fund. We're getting CDBG funding. We're getting approximately $574,000 for that. Also within the CDBG and SHIP funds, we are doing some renovations at Driftwood, including a basketball shade canopy, as well as the playground. Staying with the special revenue funds, the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, we have approximately $15.4 million set aside for next year's budget for that, and that includes projects such as Little Country Estate drainage, New River Estates drainage, as well as Oak Hill drainage improvements. And lastly, within the special revenue funds, we have our impact fees funds. We have impact fees for police, fire, parks and open space, as well as general government. We're actually seeing an overall decrease in impact fee funds by approximately 7%, or $187,000. One project worth noting for next fiscal year, a new project is utilizing $400,000 from parks impact fees towards Mirando Farms restrooms expansion. So now we're going to switch gears over to our debt service fund. The debt service fund accounts for the debt service on our most recent bond issuance, which was for Town Hall and the Davie Wetlands Park. We are transferring $2.1 million from the general fund to the debt service fund to pay the debt service associated with this bond. Next, we're going to review is the utilities fund, the water and sewer fund. And also at the last budget workshop we had, we did review the water and sewer fund in detail. And as noted before, we are going to have a 2.2% increase in the water and sewer rates for next fiscal year. As it relates to the overall budget for the fund, we are going to see a $3.5 million increase, or 6% increase to their budget. There are increases associated with personnel, moderate increase associated with merit and COLA increases within the budget. The operating expenditures will see an increase of $1.3 million. That's partially due to utilities with electric, water, and sewer. We're also going to see an increase in the administrative fee paid to the general fund, as well as an increase in insurance premiums. Insurance premiums across the board has been out of control, unfortunately. We're also going to see a $5.1 million increase in capital outlay. The capital outlay includes rolling over unfinished projects from fiscal year 23 that we're rolling over to next fiscal year, as well as the new projects in the CIP, which is for fiscal year 2024, are also included in next year's budget. We did have, in the debt service side, we did see a modest decrease in the debt service in the water and sewer fund as we continue to pay down the principal and interest associated with the bonds that we've issued in previous years. And lastly, the town and the city of Sunrise continue the study for the purchase of the town's water and sewer operations, as Ms. Lemack noted earlier on as well. So now we're going to switch over to what's called internal service funds. These account for the financing of goods and services provided by one department to the other departments. And for the town of Davie, we have 3 of them. We have the Vehicle Maintenance Fund, a Self-Insurance Fund, and an Information Technology Fund. The Vehicle Maintenance Fund is used to accumulate the cost of operating the central garage facility for vehicle and equipment maintenance and replacement. So for that budget, it's increasing by approximately $2.4 million, or 29%. Within that fund, we are replacing 3 town vehicles, and we're also purchasing 19 additions for fleet. We are carrying over from fiscal year 2023 the purchase and equip of 20 vehicles, and we're also carrying over a large CIP project, which includes expanding the fleet vehicle building, which is approximately $1.7 million. Within the self-insurance fund, The self-insurance fund is used to account for and finance the town's insured and uninsured risk of loss related to workers' comp and employee health benefits. We're seeing a modest increase of $530,000 or 3% within that fund. The budget will not see any significant changes. We are anticipating minimal changes to the costs associated with medical claims, and we're also projecting a slight increase in estimated workers' compensation costs. And lastly, we have the Information Technology Fund, which is used to account for the accumulation of capital and distributions of costs related to technology. We are seeing a modest increase of $274,000 or 3%. The town, we continue to invest heavily in our IT security and infrastructure to protect us the best that we can. And we are seeing increases on the personnel side as well as the capital outlay side within the IT fund. So this slide here, we're going to take a look at the millage rates throughout Broward County. And where do we stand? Now, I do want to give a disclaimer. Right now, what we see in front of us are what the other municipalities are proposing. Just like we are here tonight, approving a millage rate, all the other municipalities over the next several weeks during this month are doing the same thing. They're going to their council or commission to get their millage rates approved. So these numbers could change, but this is what everybody's proposing at this time. As you can see, the town of Davie, we're 23rd as we were last year. We're the bottom 1/3 of the county. Just as a side note, we do have the 7th highest taxable value in Broward County. Now, effective in fiscal year 2021, as a reminder, Town Council did approve the long-term residency low-income senior exemption, which that's in addition to the $25,000 low-income senior exemption that the town had previously and continues to offer. So as you can see here, the town, we're at the lower 1/3. Just a couple of facts here. If we were closer in the middle at approximately a 6 millage rate, that would bring in an additional $4.9 million. If we're at the high at 8.6, which of course we would never propose, but if we're at 8.6, that would bring in approximately another $39 million for the town. But as you can see, we're at 5.6250, the bottom 1/3 of the county. So for the next slide, same disclaimer, this is what is being proposed right now at other municipalities next week for their fire assessment rates that they're proposing for next fiscal year. So first, we were 24 last year, so we have moved up to number 17. So we still stayed on the right side. We're still the 11th lowest in the county, and we're 10th lowest on the millage rate. So in a pretty good position overall between the fire assessment and the millage rate. So taking a look at this chart, we have different colors. I'm trying to keep you guys on your toes. Now the colors are there for a reason. There are 27 municipalities that have a fire assessment in Broward County. Of those 27, the 22 that are in green are all proposing increases in their fire assessment rates. The ones that are in white, the 3 that are in white are maintaining theirs, and the 2 that are in red are looking to decrease theirs slightly for next fiscal year. So we looked at this chart, and we found this chart very interesting, not necessarily surprising at this point, because most municipalities are in a similar situation as us. We're looking for ways to find some way to be able to help our fire department, whether it's personnel, capital or operating. Obviously, there's a need within the Broward County to increase our fire assessment. Our goal is to ensure the safety of our residents and to ensure their protection. And in order to accomplish this, we need to increase our fire assessment to be able to get there, similar to what other municipalities are doing as well. Within our increase, Ms. Lemek noted earlier on the reasons what the increase is going to bring in, which included additional staffing on the ladder truck, the fire station renovations that we're going to be doing, as well as the purchase of a fire engine, 2 fire engines for next fiscal year. This slide represents what the impact would be to a single-family resident. This is assuming a $350,000 assessed value. So how does our fiscal year 2022 proposed budget impact a Town of Davie property owner on the Town of Davie's portion of the bill? As you can see, it's projected about an increase of $194.98, or $16.24 per month, is what the increase is. Now, we've discussed in the previous workshops why the increase is there, but we'll review that again right now. So first, the first row you see there for ad valorem, you see an increase of $59.06. Again, the Town of Davie, we are not changing our millage rate. That is staying the same. However, due to the increase by the property appraiser's office, as you see the note on the very bottom of that slide, they're increasing the rate, their assessed value by 3%. That's where we're seeing an increase for that line. If you go down to the third line on there, that is the solid waste assessment. We see an increase of $4.14 for that. Ms. Lemek noted earlier on why we're seeing an increase in there, and that is due to an increase due to the CPI, as well as we had some savings or some credits during fiscal years 22 and 23 that have now fallen off that we don't have anymore. And the last line in there is the increase in the fire, the fourth row in there is the increase of the fire assessment of $7.50 per month. And we discussed earlier on why we're having the increase, and we had extensive conversation or discussion at our first budget workshop about the increase on the fire assessment. The second row on there, debt service, you'll see a slight decrease in the debt service. And on the solid waste assessment, just as a side note, there are 15 municipalities that have a solid waste assessment. We have the fourth lowest of all the municipalities that are out there right now. The range for the municipalities right now for the solid waste assessment ranges anywhere from $272 to $693 countywide. So again, at the end of the day, we are proposing what will be approximately a $16.24 monthly impact. And to finalize the meeting, Mayor, we have our dates and meetings ahead of us. A week from tomorrow, we have our special assessments hearing here at noon, followed by 2 weeks from today, we have our second budget hearing, September 20th at 5:15 here at this same location. And with that, Mayor, we'll turn the meeting back over to you. Thank you.
I may have jumped the gun on the public hearing on this, so I'm going to go back and open the public hearing again. If anybody was able to, if you were able to absorb this and would like to ask some questions, or if you want the opportunity to, you can look at it in more depth and ask some questions between now and the 20th, and bring them back up on the 20th. So if there's anybody, yes, sir. You have to come up to the mic and state your name and address.
Yes, hi. My name is Rinat Sagitov, and I'm from 8686 Bridle Path Court. And I have a question about the increasing the rates, right? Everything, or is going to still is going to be the same. The mileage rates is going to be the same for next year, right?
Yes.
But what about the homestead exemption? Like, can we think about increasing, because the inflation goes up and homestead exemption stays the same?
That comes with the property appraiser's office. They're the ones that set that.
But can we discuss, like, in maybe some other meetings or whatever, like to raise this question? Because this is an important question, because like all prices goes up, and insurances 3 times. Like in our community, it's raised 3 times, and we gotta pay somehow. And the taxes increased 10%. So our price is like increased 10% total, and we gotta pay for insurance, for community insurance, from
Understood.
so everything. So we got to think about to reduce the taxes, not stay the same.
Mr. Lemack, would you respond to that?
Yeah, Mayor, you're correct. As far as the homestead exemption, that's something that the town does not have jurisdiction in. That would be the property appraiser's office. And again, we did not raise our millage rate. The assessment of their properties increased, which is where the value increase came from, because the property was assessed by the property appraiser's office, not the town of Davie. Our millage rate is the same and just applied to the higher rate.
And there is a process. You can challenge that with the property appraiser's office.
That's a value adjustment board, the VAB, ma'am?
Right.
Mayor, that's correct.
And I know on several occasions, the property appraiser, Mr. Kerr, has been here and has explained what the process would be if you think that you're assessed higher than you should be. If you feel that that assessment is not correct, you can challenge it and possibly have it reduced.
Yes, but how can I challenge it if my comps hasn't been sold for this year at all? Like I cannot.
I can't answer that. You'd have to.
And once we received the new taxes, property taxes, it's all those prices made from nowhere, like from the air, like without any facts. Like they just made it up.
Well, we're giving you facts tonight.
They increased for $60,000 for 60 from the last year, like from nowhere.
Again, there should be a phone number and a contact on your sheet there that you have in your hand. And if, Mr. Ackerman, would you show him and explain to him how we could address that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to speak? Step up.
Thank you, Mayor Paul, Council. Andy Bierman, 16421 Ontario Place. Actually, I have a couple of questions. One is, how much do we have in reserve? Or what do we actually keep in reserve?
Mayor, we keep 25% by our policy and resolution. We keep 25% of the general fund amount in reserves.
Thank you. My comments are about, not so much about not doing the assessments, obviously we have to do that, but with all the enhanced revenue that I heard that's coming in, even some of the stuff that's changing, like ARPA is going down, we know that. I think we maybe want to take a look at how we can maybe balance a little bit better on how we can use some of those funds instead of, hitting us, the citizens, on all of these things so hard. Since it was in the budget piece here, that fire assessment is 43% higher than it was last year. The solid waste was 16% higher than it was last year. And all it sounds like to me is that we're bearing the whole burden of this thing, when in fact I think there may be other opportunities within our budget that we may be able to do something about that. I don't know. It's just, I'm only bringing this up, posing it as a question. When you say a higher millage rate would bring in approximately X amount more millions of dollars, we all get that and everything. But here's the thing. It means the citizens are paying more. It's not that we're getting more to the city. The citizens are paying more. So where we are in the mix of all the cities, I'm not really sure that really matters. What matters is what are we going to have to pay for to make sure that we keep what we need here in Davie. So I would ask that we look at seeing if there's any way of mitigating some of the expenses for these special assessments that we have, the non-ad valorums, and find a way to maybe balance it with other things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. Any comments, council?
I just want to thank Bill and his staff and all of our staff, actually, for the hard work that you continue to do. I joked with Bill. I always tell him, thank you, you did a good job. Tonight I said, this was terrible. But it really isn't. It really demonstrates again and again, Colleen, all of you, over the years, you have done exemplary work to try to maintain this policy of our council, which is a conservative tax base and budget, and while maintaining the quality of life and services that we all expect living here. I just thank you all so much, all of staff. You continue to shine and make us proud every day. The awards that we get are evident, especially within the budget department as well. And I thank you for that. That's all I really want to say tonight.
Thank you. I think we can all understand where the individuals are coming from with their comments, and we have struggled with our budget as we've gone through all our meetings and our workshops, and the needs as we grow to over 106,000 also grow. And as is indicated before, fire and police are vital to any community. And the needs, I know the ladder truck, we've been sending it for repairs year after year after year, and it's just given out. We have to have a new one. And the best way to do that, because it's going to protect you, that's something that if you have a fire or if you need an ambulance, that's going to be there for you, and that's what a great deal of our budget is expended on. So, and I don't think there's anybody that doesn't realize the importance of public safety in everyone's life, and you don't realize it until you need it. So I keep that in mind. In the meantime, would anyone like to make a motion on the budget, number 2? Yes.
Motion to approve the budget?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Could I have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Whitman.
Yes.
Mayor Paul.
Yes.
Councilmember Starkey.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Lewis.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And understand this is a tentative budget. Staff may look at a few things between now and the second hearing, so you will have another opportunity to speak on the 20th if you so desire. Thank you very much. Let's see. So we close the public portion of the meeting. The next special meeting is the special assessments hearing. You can come to that as well. It's on Thursday, September 14th at 12 p.m. And if there are no objections, we're going to adjourn the meeting.